Hello, people. It's me again. I want to comment over a video I saw on YouTube. It's a female basically complaining about regimes in the world. She was focusing primarily those in the Middle East, where they have a lot of restrictions in their form of life. She mentioned, for example, how in certain countries, in certain Middle Eastern countries, you cannot protest. You cannot protest against the government because it's against their way of life, and you can actually be publicly executed. She mentioned one guy that protested and was set as an example on TV, on their TV channels, and they executed him on TV. I don't know how exact that is or how accurate that is. I'm I'm pretty sure that some countries would do that, especially in the Middle East. But here's the thing: here in the West, we kind of do something similar. Maybe not to that extent, always. But when it comes to, for example, Charlie Kirk, that was a public execution because he had a different opinion. It's not necessarily protesting directly against the government, but he did protest against many things, including government policies. So technically, we do the same things here in the United States when it comes to public execution, if you want to call it that. When people have a different voice or have objections when it comes to certain subjects. Not only that, we do a lot of canceling of people. People lose their careers, and again, when somebody's canceled, whether it's a famous person or not, or you get fired from work for having a different opinion. So these are also different ways to publicly, like this female mentioned, that Middle Eastern countries practice, but we do the same thing, just slightly differently at times. Kirk's is identical. So again, we can't call them regime when we do similar things. Another thing she mentioned is marriage of young ladies, underage, according to our perception here in the West. Underage is under 18, and she mentioned that teenage girls are married, which she said, that's abusive, to women, and potentially it's a form of pedophilia. But guess what? Or pedophile, I don't know if YouTube is gonna block this. But here's the sad thing: we have the Epstein file, and what is the Epstein file? It's the same thing. It's the same behavior. Yeah, they're not marrying them, but it's the same behavior. And yet those are the same leaders that we have running right now in the White House, attacking those other regimes for very, very similar behavior that we have, in this case, in America, which can also apply to the West. So again, I don't see how this person is not really... I mean, if you're going to criticize Middle Eastern countries as regimes because of these behaviors I just mentioned, you have to do the same thing for the United States. And you should start here first. And then when you clean your own country, when you clean your own house from these bad behaviors that are similar to those regimes, air quotes, then you have the moral weight to judge others. She also mentioned how in these Middle Eastern countries there's restrictions on how you dress, how women dress, and that also includes men. At least that's what she mentioned. But guess what? Here in the West, we barely have any restrictions. And guess what? That's what contributes to the wholeflation or the promiscuity that we have in the West. Something that is not as abundant in those regimes. So again, if you're going to criticize how women dress over there, I mean, it's more. I know there's more restrictions on women than men, but guess what? Once again, on this part of the world, we barely have any restrictions on women. And what has been the result? A lot of promiscuity, a lot of victimhood. Because if you look at them, again, I've said this millions of times. You look at them, you quickly, considered a creep, or so. So again, we don't want restrictions. When those restrictions are removed, now you have other restrictions that you can't even look in that direction. If not, you're creepy or you're something bad. We tend to have the same things, just obviously different. She also mentioned a woman does not have any rights or freedoms to just leave the house or leave the country, that she needs the permission of a man. So, but once again, in our part of the world, a woman has, again, no restrictions at all from her man. And this contributes to what we all know is, sometimes women hooking up with Chad or Tyrone down the street, getting her back blown, or sometimes when they have these friends getaway, these getaway with their friends, that they go to either Las Vegas, Miami, Latin America, with her friends. She doesn't care about what her husband or her partner thinks. Sometimes she does it, when he told her, hey, I don't want you to go out with I don't want you to go on this girls trip. And we, again, many videos are out there. A lot of girls go out with their friends on vacation to get their backs blown. Sleep around, promiscuity, etc. Be unfaithful, cheat. Then they come back with VD. Then paternity fraud becomes another problem. So again, people, why do we criticize other people's way of life? We do the opposite. We have much, 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 much worse outcomes. And yet then we celebrate all those horrendous outcomes, and at the same time we get mad at it. We get mad when in Houston, my understanding is that there's a high level of VD among women, especially African American women. What does that tell you? That tells you, yeah, maybe we should have certain restrictions on how our partners are dressed in public, so other guys won't get, into her body, get her a disease, potential paternity fraud. In other words, she got pregnant, she won't tell you she got pregnant by this other guy. You end up bringing up a child that's not even yours, and you find out too late. Again, a ton of problems, and yet we criticize those other countries, as a theocracy, as a dictatorship, etc. But really, first of all, theocracy is a form of government that has God as the central figure. Whether it's theocracy or not, in the West, we convert a lot of individuals as our gods. A lot of artists, a lot of actors, actresses, with their promiscuous life, way of lives, drug-driven way of life, with a message that is sent out there that is not necessarily positive. We want to be like them, we want to live like them, but a lot of them do drugs, smoke pot. A lot of them are very open relationship. Those are our gods over here in the West, and that's not good. For our young people especially. That's not good either. Again, so let's stop using the term theocracy as if it automatically means something bad. Theocracy basically means that it's a form of government where God is a central figure, and God usually pushes moral values. So that's not necessarily bad. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are bad things that happen in these countries, just like they happen here in America. But again, not much of a difference. And then when it comes to dictatorship, look, no matter who you vote into power, you're still going to get the same behavior from our politicians. Our dictatorships here, they go to war, they kidnap heads of state. They have intelligence agencies that focus more on cover-up. We have, we have the Epstein list, which has been mega redacted. We have the JFK files that have been mega redacted. We have, classified information which hides all of our sins. At least those regimes in other parts of the world, they don't necessarily hide who they are. They just identify as what they are, and hey, they, everybody knows their way of life. But over here, yeah, we have a horrible way of life, and half of it or most of it is classified information from our free country. How is America, for example, a free country when half of the bad behavior is classified information? Why are they hiding all that information? Well, because most likely because our own leaders, dictators, regime have a lot to hide from us, from the public. So again, we believe lies. We fall into lies that we therefore think it's a great thing. One point she mentioned is, that women are property over there. That they're like animals. That's one thing she mentioned. Well, guess what? In America, we're property too. We're property to the state. If you don't pay your taxes, you can easily go to jail. When it comes to property towards, for example, a woman's property toward a man, well, guess what? A man is abused, and he's property also to, actually, in our modern times, we're almost properties to women, because in a divorce, you guys get a lot, and then men are forced to pay alimony, pay child support. Sometimes the child is not even his. And that's all by force. A better country would be 50-50. Not that, she's unhappy, she takes everything, or half of your stuff, etc. 50-50 custody would be a non-regime-like system, court system, justice system, etc. But it sounds more like a regime when a man is forced. And why else is it that men's suicide rate is so high? Most likely because they feel oppressed by many things. That sounds like a regime to me. And then when women say, my body, my choice, again, women, sometimes complain here that they're property. But when you say my body, my choice, you convert your baby, your unborn baby, into property. Yeah, you heard that. You heard that clearly. You ladies convert your unborn baby into property, and you have the right to destroy that unborn child. So again, she's complaining about women being property in other countries, but you convert unborn children into property and you destroy it. Again, property. Convert humans into property. No, that's, again, and we can probably come up with many other examples. We too have our own big negatives when it comes to a lot of things, and it's sad. So before we criticize regimes in other parts of the world, or so-called regimes, first of all, respect. That's how those people most likely want to live. No country has 100% of its citizens liking their government. I'm pretty sure there's people that hate their government over there, just like many of us hate our government over here. That's simple. And if those regimes persisted for not just a few hundred years, some of these countries have been around for 2,000-3,000 years, and their way of life, who are we to judge them? America was born, 200 and something years ago? And many of these countries were born 3,000 years ago, and now we want to dictate onto them how they should live their lives? And then label them, call them all these labels on things that we ourselves practice in one form or another? I know that a lot of these Middle Eastern countries, sometimes they have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 wives. To us over here, yeah, that's bad, but guess what? A lot of guys and girls have a very high body count. It's pretty much the same thing. The only thing is that over there, at least they take care of their women. At least they do the most respectful thing and actually, take care of them and their kids. It might not be maybe the ideal way of life for us, but that's none of our business. That's their way of life. That's how they believe, and that's how they want to live. But once again, I know polygamy over there is very common, but we have our own form of polygamy, of non-polygamy. When women sleep around with a bunch of dudes. I mean, I've mentioned this before. It's almost comical when you hear, a girl sleeping with the football team. What the heck is that? What the heck is that? That's a form of polygamy. With a bunch, one partner with a bunch of other partners. And guys do the same thing, when they sleep with a bunch of girls. Again, it's a form of polygamy. So why the stupidity here? Why condemn them? Why condemn them for behavior that's similar? It might not be exactly the same, but it's very, very similar. And in our case, I think it's worse because, the outcomes are worse in our part of the world. I mean, there's no school shootings in those Middle Eastern countries. I mean, there's, when it comes to, to rape levels or VD or abortion or so many things, don't even exist there at all. And yes, there is bad behavior in every country. So, I don't know, we should use our brains a little more before we condemn another way of life. And when it comes to a theocracy, I mean, we've come to know, thanks to the Epstein list, that a lot of these people have some kind of a cult. I mean, look at that temple on Epstein Island. What the heck is that? What does that temple represent? What about when our politicians go and kiss the Western Wall in Israel? That's a form of theocracy. And these are politicians all over the Western world. They go and kiss the Western Wall. That's a form of theocracy. They're kissing a wall that represents a god from ancient times, and these politicians are driven, controlled, manipulated to do the will of a small group of people. So again, it comes back to a lot of the same behavior. It's just that we paint it a little differently, or it seems a little differently to us, and some of us don't even know that. So once again, before we label regimes and theocracies in a negative way, we're not that far off. In our case, we are technically worse. Much, much worse. Well, till next time.